My wife's art is actually mine. She has built a famous career on paintings that I made during a depressive episode, and she was the one who convinced me I had no talent. An old woman suddenly grabbed my arm and her fingers felt like twigs. She said my work was both breathtakingly sad and truly brilliant. I had to gently explain that she was mistaken about me. My wife is the famous artist, not me, I told her politely. My name is Frank, and I am a 48-year-old high school art teacher. She squinted at me and then looked at the largest painting. It was a chaotic swirl of blues and grays Evelyn called undertow. The woman insisted she could see my soul in the furious strokes. She claimed the paintings felt like a man's grief put on a canvas. I offered a weak smile and tried to excuse myself from her. I looked over at Evelyn, who was laughing with the gallery owner. She looked radiant and powerful, not like the person in those paintings. The old woman patted my hand and then shuffled away into the crowd. Her strange and specific words stayed behind with me, however. A man's grief, she had called my wife's celebrated artwork. The phrase echoed in the quiet, empty spaces of my mind. Our life together wasn't always like this, of course. I was the one who was supposed to be the artist. I had the scholarship to a prestigious art institute. I had a small studio downtown with good morning light. Evelyn loved that studio and the smell of turpentine and oil paints. She used to tell me my talent was a rare and precious gift. She believed in me more than anyone else ever had. Then my mother got sick and everything fell apart very quickly. The 6 months of her illness were a complete blur. After she was gone, a profound darkness settled over me. I couldn't eat or sleep, let alone think about painting. The grief was a physical weight that pinned me to the bed. Evelyn was my rock during that terrible, endless year. She made sure I ate and she talked to my professors. She told me to take time off to heal my broken heart. One weekend, while I was visiting my father, she packed up my studio. She said it was to remove the pressure I felt. She claimed my brushes and canvases were triggers for my depression. All my work was put into boxes and stored in our attic. She said it was a temporary measure until I felt stronger, but I never felt strong enough to go back to it. I got a stable job teaching art at the local high school. It felt safer and gave me a steady, reliable paycheck. Evelyn encouraged this decision as a very responsible choice. She said my passion for art could now inspire young minds. It was only a year later that she started painting herself. She used a spare bedroom and began with simple watercolors. It seemed like a harmless hobby, a way for her to unwind. I thought it was wonderful that she found a creative outlet. I never once thought to look in the boxes in the attic. I just assumed that my time for art was completely over. The old woman's words from the gallery would not leave me alone. I kept hearing her say, "a man's grief," over and over again. It felt like a splinter in my mind that I couldn't remove. After a week of sleepless nights, I needed to know. I needed to see what was actually in those forgotten boxes. The attic was hot and smelled of dust and old wood. I found them stacked in a dark corner under a yellowed sheet. The cardboard was soft and buckled from decades of changing temperatures. My name was written on the side in Evelyn's neat handwriting. My heart was pounding as I cut the old packing tape. Inside, the smell of linseed oil was faint but still there. I lifted out the first canvas and my breath caught. It was a study of a storm over a dark, churning ocean. The brushstrokes were wild, layered, and unmistakably the origin of her style. I pulled out another and then another, my hands starting to shake. They were all there, the raw material for her entire career. Then I found the old leather-bound sketchbook from my college days. I flipped through the pages of charcoal studies and rough compositions. Near the end of the book, I found the drawing. It was a detailed study of the twisted oak tree in my parents' backyard. I had spent a whole summer sketching that specific tree. I knew every single knot and broken branch on it. Evelyn had won her first major art prize for that exact tree. She called the painting "Still Standing" and said it represented her resilience, but she had never even seen that tree in her life. The world suddenly tilted sideways and the air grew thin. I walked down from the attic with the sketchbook in my hands. The house felt cold despite the warmth of the summer evening. Evelyn was in the kitchen preparing dinner as if nothing was wrong. She smiled when I walked in, a perfect picture of domestic peace. I held out the sketchbook, my hand trembling slightly. I opened it to the page with the drawing of the oak tree. I asked her to please just explain this one thing to me. She looked at the drawing and then back at my face. A look of gentle, pitying concern washed over her features. She said that, of course, she remembered my old drawings. She told me they had been a profound inspiration for her work. She claimed she thought I would be happy about her success. She said we had built this beautiful life together from it. Then her voice became softer, full of deep worry. She asked if I was feeling like myself lately. She wondered aloud if my depression might be returning again. She suggested that perhaps my memory was getting a little foggy. She reminded me how dark and chaotic my mind had been back then. She carefully explained that she had given my pain a new purpose. Her words were so calm and reasonable that they made me dizzy. I felt a wave of shame for even suspecting her of anything. I was the one who was broken, not her beautiful career. I closed the sketchbook and mumbled an apology for it. She came over and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. She told me that she loved me more than anything. I felt the comforting weight of her hug and the crushing weight of my own confusion. I had the proof right there in my hands, but she made me feel insane for believing it. For the next 2 weeks, I lived inside a thick and silent fog. I went to work and graded student projects. I had dinner with Evelyn and talked about our days. We acted like everything was perfectly normal between us. But underneath the surface, I felt a chasm growing wider each day. Her gentle concern had been more damaging than any angry denial. It made me feel like a traitor in my own home. I kept seeing the sketchbook in my mind, but her voice would cloud the memory. I knew I needed something else, something that she could not twist. I needed proof that was separate from my own fragile memory. I waited for a Saturday when she was out for the entire day. She was meeting with a curator from a museum in the city. I went into my home office and started searching through old boxes. I was looking for the ancient desktop computer we owned in the late 90s. I finally found the tower buried in the back of a closet. It was heavy and yellowed with age, a fossil from another life. I spent an hour finding the right cables to connect it. The machine whirred to life with a loud grinding sound. It took forever to boot up its ancient operating system. I clicked through old folders filled with financial spreadsheets and bad poetry. Then I found a folder that was simply labeled Studio Work. My breath hitched as I clicked it open for the first time. The folder was full of dozens of low-resolution JPEG files. The first image loaded slowly, line by painful line. It was one of my storm paintings, photographed against the brick wall of my old studio. I clicked on the next one and the next after that. They were all there, a complete digital archive of my lost work. I checked the metadata on the image files. Each one had a creation date from the summer of 1999. Evelyn had her very first gallery show in the spring of 2002. The fog in my head finally began to clear away. It was cold, hard, and undeniable proof of the timeline. That night, I called my best friend from art school, a man named Mark. I had not spoken to him in at least 5 years. We made small talk about our jobs and our families. Then I casually asked if he remembered those storm paintings I made. I said I was feeling nostalgic for the old days. Mark laughed and said he remembered them vividly. He described the specific Prussian blue I was obsessed with using. He even recalled a night we spent drinking cheap beer and arguing about one. He said it was the best work I had ever done in my life. He asked me why I ever decided to completely stop painting. I did not have a good answer for him. After we hung up the phone, I sat in the darkness for a very long time. There was no more confusion left inside of me. There was only a cold and heavy certainty now. The certainty I felt did not lead to immediate action. Instead, it turned me into a quiet observer in my own life. I watched Evelyn move through our home with a new clarity. I saw the way she charmed people at gallery openings. I noticed how her stories about her inspiration were always vague. She was a brilliant actress playing the part of a sensitive artist. A profound and icy calm had settled deep inside my bones. I was no longer a victim of her deception. I was now just waiting for the right moment to come. That moment arrived in an email from my old university. My former mentor, Professor Alistair Finch, was in town. He was giving a guest lecture on contemporary art. He was the one who had secured my art school scholarship. He had once told me I had more raw talent than anyone he had ever taught. I knew this was the perfect opportunity I needed. I invited him to our house for dinner that Friday. I told Evelyn it was a chance to reconnect with my past. She thought it was a wonderful and healthy idea for me. She had no idea that she was walking into a trap. The dinner itself was a masterclass in polite tension. Alistair was a loud, joyful man with a booming laugh. He praised Evelyn's success and she soaked it all in. I played the part of the proud and supportive husband. After the plates were cleared, I said I had something to show him. I went upstairs and brought down the dusty portfolio from the attic. I told him I found some of my old college work. Evelyn's smile became a little bit tighter around the edges. I laid the canvases out on the dining room table. Alistair went completely silent for a very long time. He put on his reading glasses and leaned in close. He touched the surface of one painting with a reverent finger. Then he looked at me with genuine shock in his eyes. He asked me why on earth I had ever stopped painting. He said it was a criminal waste of a God-given talent. He then turned to Evelyn with a cheerful, innocent smile. He told her he could certainly see where she found her early inspiration. The look on her face in that single moment was everything. It was not shame or guilt or even simple embarrassment. It was the cold, hard fury of a queen being unmasked. The air in the room became thick and impossible to breathe. Alistair, oblivious, just kept on telling old stories. When he finally left, the silence he left behind was absolute. The sound of the front door latching felt like a gunshot. We stood in the wreckage of our dining room. My old canvases were laid out like evidence at a crime scene. Evelyn did not look at me for a long time. She slowly gathered the wine glasses with a steady hand. She took them to the kitchen, and I could hear the water running. She was trying to reclaim some small piece of normal routine. When she came back, her face was a mask of cold composure. All the warmth was gone, leaving something brittle and unfamiliar. I finally asked her if it was all true. She looked at me then, her eyes completely devoid of any emotion. She told me the truth was that I was a coward. She said I had let my talent rot in a dark attic. She claimed my art was just a symptom of my depression. She insisted she had rescued it from my own weakness. She gave my forgotten paintings a life I was too afraid to give them. Her voice was steady and did not have a trace of regret. She told me I should be grateful for her actions. She said our beautiful house was paid for by my abandoned grief. She reminded me that her success had given me a comfortable life. She said I had been profiting from my own pain for decades. Her words were not meant to hurt me anymore. They were simply a statement of facts from her perspective. I felt a strange and unsettling sense of detachment from it all. I was listening to a stranger confess to a terrible crime. The woman I had loved for 25 years was not real. She had been a careful and brilliant invention all along. I was not married to a person, but to a predator. She finished speaking, and the terrible silence returned to the room. There was absolutely nothing left for us to say to each other. I turned around and walked out of the dining room. I went up the stairs to our bedroom and closed the door. I turned the old brass lock until I heard it click shut. That small sound was the real end of our marriage. I woke up the next morning before the sun had risen. The bedroom was cold, and I felt a strange sense of clarity. The grief I expected to feel was not there at all. All the sadness and confusion had been burned away in the night. What was left behind was something quiet, hard, and purposeful. I showered and dressed without making a single sound. Evelyn was still asleep in one of the guest rooms down the hall. I went to my office and began to gather the evidence. I placed the old sketchbook into my leather briefcase. I copied the folder of dated photographs onto a new USB drive. I wrote a detailed factual summary of the dinner with Alistair. I even documented my phone conversation with my old friend Mark. Each action was deliberate and devoid of any real emotion. I was simply an archivist collecting the proof of a long con. I walked downstairs and saw her sleeping on the guest room sofa. I looked at her for a moment, a stranger in my own house. I felt absolutely nothing, no anger, and certainly no love. I left my house keys on the kitchen counter beside the sink. Then I walked out the front door without looking back once. I had an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in intellectual property. Her office was in a tall glass building downtown. It felt like a different world, clean and sterile and logical. I did not tell her a long, emotional story about my marriage. I just laid out the evidence on her polished conference table. I presented the facts calmly and in chronological order. I showed her the sketchbook and the time-stamped digital images. I gave her my written account of the witness conversations. She listened patiently and examined every single piece of it. Her expression was neutral, but I could see a flicker of interest. When I was finished, she looked at me for a moment. She said I had a very compelling and unusual case. She asked me what exactly I wanted to achieve with this. I told her I was not looking for a quiet settlement. I wanted public credit for every single piece of my work. I wanted my name to replace hers on every painting. I wanted a full accounting of every dollar she had ever made. I was not looking for peace or for some kind of closure. I was simply taking back what was rightfully mine. My lawyer sent the official letters the following Monday morning. One went to Evelyn at the house, another to her gallery downtown. The documents were formal, cold, and legally precise. They demanded she cease and desist from claiming authorship of my work. They also froze all sales and future exhibitions pending the lawsuit. The first phone call came from the gallery owner an hour later. He was in a complete and utter panic over the situation. He tried to appeal to our long and profitable friendship. He begged me to retract the claim and handle this matter privately. He said I was destroying Evelyn's reputation over a simple misunderstanding. I told him calmly that it was no longer a private matter. Then I ended the call and blocked his number from my phone. Evelyn's response came 2 days later, and it was a masterpiece of retaliation. She gave an exclusive interview to a major art news publication. The article was a brutal and systematic character assassination. She painted me as a deeply troubled man with a history of depression. She claimed I was jealous of the success she had achieved. She described this lawsuit as a desperate, vindictive fantasy. She said I was a failed artist trying to steal her legacy. Her lies were so convincing that even I almost believed them. The fallout from the article was immediate and devastatingly swift. Old friends sent me text messages filled with pity and scorn. They told me I needed to get professional help for my issues. Neighbors who used to wave at me now avoided my gaze. I was a pariah in the town where I had lived for 30 years. The scandal eventually followed me to my job at the school. My principal called me in for an uncomfortable private meeting. He spoke about the school's reputation in the local community. He mentioned concerned phone calls from a few of the parents. He did not threaten to fire me, but the message was clear. I was now a liability to everyone and everything around me. I sat there in his office and felt the last ties to my old life breaking. There was no going back to the way things were before. I had lost my wife, my friends, and now my career was at risk. But I did not feel fear or regret, only a steely resolve. The public battle she had started was one I intended to finish. Evelyn's public attack was a strategic and fatal miscalculation. She thought that isolating me would make me weak and desperate, but being completely alone gave me a strange and potent freedom. I no longer had anyone to protect or to disappoint. I knew that my old evidence was not going to be enough. She had already framed it as the work of a troubled mind. I needed to provide something that she could not possibly deny. I went to an art supply store for the first time in 25 years. I bought a large canvas, brushes, and the specific shades of blue oil paint. I spent the next week in a small, rented studio space. Painting again did not feel joyful or cathartic in any way. It was a cold and methodical exercise in pure muscle memory. I was not creating something new, I was reasserting a fundamental truth. I painted a storm over a dark and violent ocean. The chaotic, layered brushstrokes felt like my own native language. My lawyer arranged a press conference at her downtown office. We invited every major art journalist, including the one who wrote Evelyn's story. I stood at a podium, calm and dressed in a simple suit. I did not look like the unstable man from her interview. I methodically presented my case with the help of my lawyer. I showed the sketchbook and the dated digital photographs. I presented a sworn affidavit from my old professor, Alistair Finch. I laid a careful and undeniable foundation of the truth. Then, for the final blow, I had 2 assistants unveil my new painting. The room was filled with a stunned and immediate silence. The journalists and critics stared at the fresh, unvarnished canvas. They could clearly see it was the work of the same artist. It was the living proof that this talent belonged to me. I announced I was suing for full rights and all past profits. It was not an emotional plea for justice or for peace. It was simply the end of her long and profitable lie. The room erupted with the sound of camera shutters flashing. The legal battle ended not with a roar, but with a whimper. Evelyn's lawyers settled before we ever saw a courtroom. Her public disgrace was so absolute that a trial was unthinkable. She disappeared from the art world without a single trace. I heard she moved to another country to live in obscurity. Her name became a cautionary tale whispered at gallery openings. I won the lawsuit and reclaimed the rights to all my work. A very large sum of money was deposited into my bank account. I quit my teaching job and bought a sterile modern apartment downtown. It has white walls and large windows that overlook the entire city. My old paintings, the ones from the attic, are here with me now. They are leaning against the walls in the spare, empty rooms. I look at them sometimes, and I feel absolutely nothing at all. They are not art to me anymore, just expensive evidence. The art world tried to embrace me as a lost, tragic hero. Galleries offered me shows, and critics wanted to write long articles. I ignored all of their calls and all of their emails. The desire to paint is completely gone from my life. The part of me that created those things died 25 years ago. Evelyn didn't just steal my canvases and my style, she stole the artist himself, leaving an empty space behind. Sometimes I stand by the large windows at night. I look down at the endless stream of headlights below me. I have the money, the recognition, and the absolute truth. I won, and I have never felt so completely and utterly alone. The lie was my entire life for so many years. Now there is nothing left but the silence and the emptiness. There was no lesson to be learned here, just a brutal accounting. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your reaction helps me create new stories.